Welcome to Test Chamber 4. The Enrichment Center regrets to inform you that this next test is impossible. Quit now, and cake will be served immediately.
I want cake. I always want cake.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dad from Spumutted. We like magic, all that, you know by now. And today we're going to do something kind of weird. We're going to be brewing with God-Pharaoh's Gift. Yay! God-Pharaoh's Gift, right? Seems like a pretty cool card, you know? You get it out, you start reanimating stuff every turn, you get like ETB triggers, you get like 4/4 dudes and stuff. Like, seems cool. You get your Gate to the Afterlife out, your 6 dudes in the graveyard, you go search up your God-Pharaoh's Gift. Pretty cool deck, and I've seen a bunch of different builds of it, you know? A lot of these builds that I've seen have either been Sultai or Blue, Red, or Grixis, you know? Some combination of those colors. But I've already done a Sultai deck that I've been working on for a while, so I didn't want to copy that there, and the Sultai versions look not amazing, so I skipped over that. And like the Grixis decks, I've already done a Grixis deck too, you know? And the blue-red ones, it's like they're really dependent on Insolent Neonate. You absolutely have to have it like turn 1 for the deck to really work, so I just wasn't a big fan of that either. But I've decided to do something completely different and brew up blue-white God-Pharaoh's Gift. But if I'm going to show you this deck, then you have to know what at least 2 of these cards do before I show you like anything else. So I've already shown them to you a little bit here, but let me elaborate on Gate to the Afterlife and God-Pharaoh's Gift. We're going to play 4 copies of GTA San Andreas and 2 copies of GPG. Well, first of all, this pretty much translates to 6 copies of God-Pharaoh's Gift. You know, we only need to play a couple of copies because it's really expensive if we're not just going and searching it up and slapping it onto the battlefield. It's a pretty expensive card, so we don't need a bunch of copies, even though it's not legendary. You could play 3 or 4 copies of this, it'd be totally fine, but we're essentially running a bunch of copies anyway. I don't feel like we need to devote more slots to running God-Pharaoh's Gift. You know, but a couple of things about this card is that it puts the creature into play on your side with haste right before your combat step. That's pretty cool. Which means that you can get into the battlefield triggers and stuff off of that creature right before your combat step, which can be really, really important a lot of the time. So, big fan of the fact that it gives it haste, too. Do note that. So, any big 4/4 with abilities that you put into play is also going to be hasty, which is pretty cool. A few things about Gate to the Afterlife that I feel like I should point out. Like, it's not strictly a tutor. It does lots of stuff on the way to going and getting that God-Pharaoh's Gift, you know. First of all, whenever a creature you control dies, you gain a life. That keeps you in the game a little bit longer some of the time. That at least has to be mentioned. It's not a bad part of the card. And when one of your creatures dies, you also get to draw a card and discard a card, meaning that you can dump another creature into your graveyard. So if a creature died and you discard a creature, you've just gotten 1/3 of the way there in one fell swoop. That's not bad at all. And the fact that like when one of your dudes dies, you get to do all of this stuff is kind of really cool, you know? A creature dies, oh, I gain a life and I draw a card and I get to dump a creature in there. It's like, there's a lot happens when just one dude dies. It's really not a bad card in and of itself. Now here's the thing about God-Pharaoh's Gift, right? You have to have 6 dudes in your graveyard before you can sacrifice that Gate to the Afterlife and go get a God-Pharaoh's Gift. So that's a lot of creatures, right? So we have to run a butt ton of creatures in order not only to get the 6 guys in our yard fairly quickly, you know, relatively quickly at least, but also so that we have stuff to get out of our graveyard with God-Pharaoh's Gift once it's on the battlefield. So with that in mind, we're going to play 29 creatures. That's a lot. But again, we have to play a whole butt ton. And blue and white have a lot of good creatures when it comes to things like enter the battlefield abilities, really good stuff on the high end of white. There's a bunch of white 5-drops right now that do awesome stuff when they enter the battlefield. So we've got some really good options in these colors for impactful creatures that enter the battlefield hot with like really cool abilities. So let's take a look at what we got here, starting with some more tutors. You know, we've already got Gate to the Afterlife to tutor up God-Pharaoh's Gift, but we've also got some other artifact tutors here. I was going to say fartifact tutors. Some artifact tutors here, starting with the 4 copies of Glint-Nest Crane and ending with the 1 copy of Trophy Mage. Well, Trophy Mage looks like just a random one-up, but it's actually just a 5th copy of Gate to the Afterlife. If you want to look at it that way, it's totally fine. And it's a creature. That means that we can, you know, eternalize it with God-Pharaoh's Gift a little bit later on, go get another Gate to the Afterlife if we want one. And there's a creature in our sideboard that we can also get with a Trophy Mage after game 1. So, important to point out, Trophy Mage is cool. We need creatures to put in our yard. This is a good ETB effect, so let's do all that. And then Glint-Nest Crane, you know, it's an early creature. We need some stuff to play early in this deck. I realized very early on in building this that we were pretty short on low-end drops. So Glint-Nest Crane fills that. He's a decent blocker in the early game. He can even ping your opponent a couple of times. He flies. That's cool. When you bring him back, he's a 4/4 flyer, which is something you always want. And you can just go ahead and impulse the top 4 cards for an artifact again. But obviously, when you play him on turn 2, he can help you find a gate to the Afterlife or even a God-Pharaoh's Gift. But you're really looking to find the gate to the Afterlife in that circumstance. So I'm a big fan of Glint Nest Crane. Again, early drop, blocks well, and helps us find our key artifacts. Let's play him. Now, 13 of our creatures, that's a lot, have cycling, so let's run through those real quick, starting with the stuff on the lower end of the cycling curve, at least. And that's the 4 copies of Curator of Mysteries and the 3 copies of Striped River Winder. I always want to say River Winder. I have to really enunciate that W, or my mouth won't say it right. But River Winder is actually not terrible. I don't think he's worth 4 copies, but both of these are creatures that we can cycle for just 1 mana, which is really important for a couple of reasons in this deck. Not just getting 6 creatures in our graveyard as fast as possible, but that is the best reason to play 1 mana cyclers. And River Winder is pretty cool when we can get him back with God-Pharaoh's Gift. A 4/4 hexproof actually isn't a really bad deal at all. And Curator of Mysteries, yet another 4/4 flyer. We'll see a bunch of those. Another 4/4 flyer, whether you've eternalized it with God-Pharaoh's Gift or not. You're getting a 4/4, and it flies. And the scry ability is really good, too, in a deck with essentially 15 cards with cycling, not counting lands with cycling. So it's like 18 cards with cycling in this deck. So the actual printed ability that's not just flying, Curator of Mysteries, can be really important sometimes. To continue our cycling menagerie here, we're going to go with 4 copies of Hollow One in the deck, which was originally a 3 of, and River Winder was a 4 of, but in light of recent events, I've decided to flip those numbers. I think this is just better to have a 4 of Hollow One at the end of the day. Now, you can get this on turn 3, cycle, pay 1 for it, boom, but that's not the only application of the card. First of all, it's a creature with cycling, so it goes in our graveyard really easily when we need it to. Also, we can get it with Glint Nest Crane, We need a few more artifacts in this deck so we actually have some more targets for Glint Nest so he doesn't whiff so often. So he's good for that, too, and he's just a 4/4 that we can usually play for just a mana or a 3. It's not terrible. So I'll play Hollow One. He hasn't been quite as impressive as I'd hoped he'd be. I've seen some builds dedicated to him that go like, Insolent Neonate turn 1 and then Haunted Dead, and you end up getting back like all of your prize amalgams and you play a free hollow one on like turn 3 and you just put like 12 power on the board. Like that deck looks pretty interesting. But in this deck, we're not doing anything crazy like that, but we will put out a 3rd turn hollow one sometimes, and he's not even bad like a little bit later on in the game. Sometimes you'd be surprised what a 4/4 can do for you. It all boils down to like, I just didn't think that we should take him out, Again, the card hasn't been as impressive as I once hoped he'd be, but end of the day, he's an artifact for Glint Nest Crane. He's a creature in the graveyard for Gate to the Afterlife. He's a 4/4 that we can play for as little as like 1 or even free sometimes, So I just felt like there were so many reasons to play the card that even though he felt not quite up to my expectations, but I was expecting an awful lot, that he still deserved a 4 of because he's so synergistic in the deck. To finish off our cycling dudes, I'm just going to play 2 copies of Nimble Obstructionist in the deck. And yeah, just 2 copies. I felt like he was a little bit too narrow to play a 4 of, But when he works, he's pretty good because he's got some good applications in this format. First of all, Planeswalker activations, including ultimates, can be pretty sweet. Also, Glorybringer, which is really important. And also, like, Crypt Breaker, any other, like, ETB triggers and stuff. Like, lots of cool stuff that an Obstructionist can do for you in the format. Not only that, but he's a creature in the yard. Like, good stuff. And he flies. All that's nice. You can get a 4/4 Obstructionist later on if you want him, after God-Pharaoh's Gift comes down. So just a decent card. We need cycling guys to put in our graveyard. And he's sort of a counterspell against onboard abilities. I'll take all of that. Any day, totally. Also, don't forget to draw the card when you cycle Nimble Obstructionist and like counter that exert trigger or whatever you're doing, Draw the card. It is really easy to forget that you're not just casting a counterspell. Draw the card. I'm going to play 4 copies of Champion of Wits in this deck, too. You just saw him in the Sultai deck. But he's also in this deck because he still does everything we want. He's a sort of early, sort of mid-game drop that draws us a couple of cards, dumps some dudes in our graveyard fairly easily, When we eternalize him with a God-Pharaoh's Gift, that's 4 cards in our hand, and we can discard a couple, But still, we draw 4 cards. That's awesome. You can just naturally eternalize him if the game gets late, He does everything, man. He comes down and blocks a turn for you. Like Fog's a really big guy sometimes. Give you some card selection, dump some dudes in your yard. Like just everything Champion of Wits does is really good. It's a good card, guys. said it a lot already, between this and Sultai and the top 15 video. I've said a lot of the reasons that I like this card in this format. I'm a big fan of Champion of Wits, and this probably won't be the last deck you see it in. Now, so far, we haven't really seen a whole lot of white in this deck. I've told you it's a blue-white deck, so let's look at some of our payoffs for playing white, starting with the 3 copies of Selfless Spirit. This thing's awesome, and you knew that already, but in this deck, this thing's awesome. First note on this is that it's a really easy creature to put in your graveyard. You just sacrifice it and you're done. There's a lot of combat situations that this thing makes a total nightmare for your opponent. And you can get it back with God-Pharaoh's Gift, man. Just put that Selfless Spirit token into play, and now you've got a 4/4 flyer that can threaten to make the whole rest of your team indestructible for the rest of the turn. Like, Selfless Spirit is as good as it's always been, and yes, Hour of Devastation being in the format kind of makes it take a hit a little bit, but that being said, 90% of the time your opponent's not holding an Hour of Devastation. So Selfless Spirit is just as good as it's always been. It's a key card in a lot of like blue-white flash decks. It's no different here. It's just as good or better than it is in those decks, because it is, again, a creature we can put into our graveyard and then later get a 4/4 flyer that makes our team indestructible. Come on, man. Come on. Selfless Spirit's so good. Speaking of indestructibility, by the way, I'm going to play 3 copies of Archangel Avacyn in the deck because we should do that. Also, don't have to tell you that Avacyn works really well with Selfless Spirit. Selfless Spirit is a way to force a transform on your Avacyn, and it's a way, when your Avacyn does transform, to protect the rest of your whole team other than Selfless Spirit. These cards go together so super well, and Avacyn is just a great flash flying threat that can come down at any time, Just still a really, really good card in this format. Avacyn will probably never be bad, and the ability to just, get an Avacyn token back right before we go to swing in, it's pretty nice, All of our dudes get indestructible for the rest of the turn, swing. That's pretty sweet to be able to threaten that. Now, to finish off the creatures in the deck, we're just going to play 1 copy of Angel of Sanctions in the main deck. I've got another one on the board against mid-range and such, but I find that this is always good to have. This is sort of a fun of, sort of an actual important one of, Sometimes this will come down and just, get rid of their biggest dude for you, and suddenly you'll have a big old flyer on the board. That's nice. Just Angel of Sanctions, I think, is a decent one of, and if you wanted to go down to 2 Avacyn and go up to 2 Angel of Sanctions, I could support that move, but I really like my Avacyn. I really do. And to finish off the deck, just 2 copies of Cast Out. This gives us 15 total cyclers in the deck, which drives down the land count that we can play. I think that's important. And also, it's removal. I've already said we don't really have a whole lot of removal. So we'll play at least a couple copies of Cast Out, because it takes care of pretty much everything. It's catch-all against, gods, other troublesome creatures, planeswalkers, even enchantments like Fraying Sanity, and, new perspectives and stuff. This can take out all kinds of stuff, so we'll play a couple of copies at least. Here are your lands right here. There's 23 of them in this deck, and again, we're playing so many cyclers. I feel like we can get away with 23 lands fairly easily. Here's your sideboard right here. We got a little control package in there. 1 Dispel, 2 Negate, and 3 Spell Queller. Now, Spell Queller could definitely be in the main deck, and if he was, the deck would start looking an awful lot, conspicuously so, like Blue-White Flash. A lot of similarities to that deck here. But I still think Spell Queller is one of the best cards in Standard, so he's going to be in the 75 somewhere. And, he kind of sucks with God-Pharaoh's Gift. He'll never counter a spell if you get him back with God-Pharaoh's Gift, but at least you can get back yet another 4/4 flyer, so that's not bad. Negate is in there against everything, literally. Heart of Kirin, Planeswalkers, enchantments, other artifacts like Oketra's Monument. Just really important card, I think Negate is right now. And Dispel is for against control decks, which we already have a fair amount of game against. If we can get a God-Pharaoh's Gift against control, then that's gonna be a serious problem for them, unless they get their Abrade. Our deck is a little bit weak to Abrade if you haven't noticed, and things like Dispel and Negate can really help out in that regard. We got some more removal in there, too. We've got Declaration in Stone, Forsake the Worldly, and Fumigate. Fumigate, there's just the one of, but I do like having a panic button if we absolutely need it against really fast decks. Declaration in Stone is good against literally anything, including indestructible gods and Ulamogs and such, but it's also a good tool against the Oketra's Monument decks. If you haven't seen these decks, I'm going to give you a version of one very, very soon, because I'm actually in love with the Oketra's Monuments decks, but they are a pain in the butt to play against. They put out a million creatures by like turn 5, and there's really not a lot we can do about it, but Declaration in Stone changes that. We can get rid of all of their tokens, which is sometimes very important. So we'll do that. And Forsake the World, we can take out Monument itself, along with, again, all the troublesome enchantments that we might run across in the format, and all the ridiculous artifacts, all the way up to Torrential Gearhulk. So Forsake the Worldly, I would make the argument, is main deckable, but we're just going to keep it in the sideboard. Here are your power rankings. A final score of 63, which is not bad for a deck that's only going to cost you about $115 on TCG Player. And you could drive down the cost of this deck a good bit. You know, you don't have to play the Spell Quellers in the board. You don't even have to play the 3 of Avacyn. You could probably chop that down to a 2 of and find room for something else that costs less. You know, you could put like Sphinx of the Final Word in here, and that only costs like $3 right now. That'd be a good reanimation target for God-Pharaoh's Gift. Hell, you could even go all the way up to Ulamog. That would be a pretty sweet reanimation target for God-Pharaoh's Gift too. So this deck has a lot of room to improve if you wanted to do that. You know, you could even throw in like Gideon's in the sideboard if you wanted to. The deck feels like it wants it. Even though Gideon doesn't synergize with the deck super well, Gideon's just always good. Gideon's a spiky card. So if you had him, yeah, probably throw a couple into the 75 somewhere. The deck can get run over by really fast aggro in game 1, and it can suffer a little bit against the Oketra's Monument deck. I've already pointed that deck out a couple of times, but any go-wide strategy like that is going to be a problem for us. So just keep that in mind. But against mid-range strategies, we do really well, and there's a bunch of important mid-range strategies in the format right now. And we have the opportunity to punish control a fair amount too, and I have seen so much control lately between cockatrice and spikes and like sales data, you know, on various sites. Everyone looks like they're buying into control right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if control was a very important deck in the upcoming standard. And this deck has a pretty good shot at punishing it. But that's all I've got for this one. I'm tapped out for now. Let me know how you felt about this really weird thing. Like, there's undeniably good cards in it. If you can just play a straight game up until like turn 5, get your God-Pharaoh's Gift out, well then, if you're still in things, then you've got a great value engine for the rest of the game. So you can get there. The deck is actually pretty good, but let me know how you change it. Maybe you'll add whole other colors, you know. It seems like black would be a good color for this deck. So let me know what you'd put in that I didn't include here. And as always, this is important. What are we doing next time? I've got some options. Well, I've got 3 decks that I want you to choose from this time. First of all, the budget option, one from the loser bracket. I'm putting it back up though. 8 Alchemist. This is basically a red deck that just looks to go through its deck really, really quickly and accumulate damage with Alchemist, a Thermo Alchemist, and Firebrand Archer. So, do you want to see that deck? It's pretty cheap and really, really fun. Or since it's the weekend of the first constructed tournament of Hour of Devastation, there's going to be a Star City Games Open this weekend. Do you want to see a competitive deck? Because 2 decks that I think might be decent in this format are, 1, Red-Green Ramp, something that's getting a lot of buzz right now because of Hour of Promise mostly putting out Ulamog on turn 5. That seems good. Or we could do Red-Black Aggro, a deck that looks to maybe be a little under the radar to me, but super powerful nonetheless. And by the way, when I say aggro and Red-Black Aggro, don't think like 1 and 2 cost guys and nothing else. Like, this deck plays Glorybringers and Thought-Knot Seers. Deck looks really stupid powerful. So let me know what you want to see. 8 Alchemist, Red-Green Ramp, or Red-Black Aggro. But that's pretty much all the information that I have to give to you for this one, guys. I'm going to try something a little bit different on this video, and hopefully for the rest of the videos, if this one works out. Somebody in the comments suggested the other day that I do something that I really should have been doing this whole time, and that is just doing the YouTube spiel over an end card. So with that in mind, I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. You know, if you enjoyed that content, what you should do is you hit the like button, because that helps me out. It puts the video in more recommended feeds. You can also do other YouTube-related stuff. You can subscribe if you're new. You can hit that bell. Make sure you get notifications. Then you'll get all the deck text. That'll make you a happier, more well-rounded person. So you should do that. You can also check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. You want to help us look better because we look like doo-doo. We could look better, so help us out on Patreon. Or you can follow us on Twitter at SBMTGDev. And that is all the YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching.